honored today to have Michaela be one of our keynotes. How'd you feel about your presentation?
I hope I lived up to the stage. It was a gorgeous stage. So I was a little mesmerized, but I think it went really well. This crowd was like very easygoing too. So I always feed off energy, and this was a really good crowd to speak to.
Indeed. Well, I'm sort of, my role is to be a scout for talent like you. And I have to say that I originally had contracted you to just speak.
Yeah.
And then I started looking deeper at your portfolio and saw a presentation you did at LinkedIn. And I said, I should really elevate Michaela to the main stage. I think she's a tremendous talent, and I'm happy to have perhaps have other chairs think about her as a keynote. She's an evangelist, of course, for LinkedIn and what you're doing over there in your community and building a community around her the right way. We love risk takers. As you can see, I'm a risk taker with everything we do here. But anyway, what are your thoughts on how you have learned to connect with your audience and a big one at that?
Yeah. So I think that, I'm a social media person, so one of my favorite things to do is to look up the hashtag before I go anywhere, because I hate going into rooms cold. So if I can go into a room and I can connect with somebody in advance before I walk into that room, I at least know I have one friend in the room. Yeah. And that makes a huge difference. So I love doing a little bit like even when I'm doing like breakout sessions, like standing at the door and inviting people in, right? Kind of like making it your home. And I try to make the stage my home as much as possible. So I think that's the biggest one. I think, honestly, sometimes it's just talking about how nervous you are. I know there's other people that don't really do that, but even for my very first keynote, which was at the Sony Center, there was one part at the very beginning where I actually say, this is my very first keynote. And that, I had rehearsed that thing a million times, and that wasn't part of it. But I stood up there, and I was like, in my head, I was like, this is too big for me to keep to myself. And so I shared that secret with the audience, and all of a sudden, I had people that were kind of like sizing me up, and then all of a sudden, they're on my side because they're like, oh gosh, she's got to make this happen. Especially like people that are entrepreneurs and risk takers, and I think all marketers are risk takers, and so they love people that take risks, especially on stage. And so I think that if you can be really, that's my whole thing, is just being open and vulnerable and honest, and come into it that way rather than just being very poised and perfect and polished. I think that makes a really big difference, at least for me.
You had literally came up with a concept that tried to reflect exactly what you just said. Be yourself, and I think in social media, that's really what your message was today. Be yourself. Be who you are. Don't try to be somebody that you're not. You did that in an interesting way. You got on the stage, you talked, and you said, "Oh, these heels. I need to do a wardrobe trans." We literally had probably the first ever keynote wardrobe stage. It was a purposeful wardrobe stage, unlike Janet Jackson, and had a major wardrobe trip. But there was dead silence in the audience. People didn't really, were like, wow, your acting was so incredible.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Oh, it was fantastic. But then you got back on the stage and everybody clapped, and it was like, this moment. But how did you develop a concept like that?
Well, I'm a big believer in showing, not telling, and I think that there's so many people that just want to get up and like preach and talk at people. Yeah. And so if my whole talk is about being yourself and letting down your guard and kind of that integration between like the work self and the personal self, I kind of have to like walk the walk, I think, right? And so that was something that was added in there, as in, this is actually how I dress. This is actually how I behave when I'm not on this stage. So let me bring that part of me. If I could bring my dogs, I would do that too. They would be a little bit distracting, but that's who I am. So why would I bring anybody else to the stage?
Got it. You've been at lots of different conferences, and you've been traveling around the world speaking. What are the best venues for you? And was Content Marketing Conference a good one for you? How do we stack up?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I feel like each one is so different. And the biggest thing is people, right? I don't think a conference is a good conference just because of like the content or because the swag. All of those things are nice to have, but really at the end of the day, what are the connections that you're making? What are the relationships that you're forming? And so what I really love about this conference is that there's so much room to network in a very authentic, real human way. And so the relationships that have been formed here or like developed because I met someone elsewhere have been really great. I also really love the idea that there's so much comedy that's injected into here, because I feel like adding that in makes people less like, this is my poised professional self, and so they tend to be more relaxed and more candid just walking around, and I think that really does make a big difference.
Do you have any advice for your fans on how they get on the stage like you have and do a keynote? Or
Yeah, I've been talking about this a little bit, and it sounds so simplistic, but it's just ask. Like, I think that there are so many, and it's actually a really huge issue for females that just don't pitch themselves. I mean, there's so much talk about, keynote speakers and having like a balance of genders and all of this stuff, but the reality is that it is an issue. My very first keynote was at the Sony Center, is in front of 2,000 people, and so many people asked me how I got that gig, and the reality is I called the coordinator, and I said, look, listen, I know a bunch of people that are speaking, they're friends of mine, we're all working in the same space, this is what I bring to the table, are you interested? And she kind of like paused and she took a deep breath, and I was like, oh, it's like gonna be a no, right? And she's like, Michaela, I get 3 of these phone calls per week from men, and I get about 2 phone calls like this per year. And it was that moment where I'm like, I don't even care if I get this gig. This is a strategy that I'm going to use from now on, because why? Either you get the gig or it's a great story because you tried and it didn't happen, but maybe it'll happen next time. So, and I'm a big believer in that. That's the great part of being a marketer. Is like, whether you succeed or fail, you still got a great story.
Yeah, that's right. As a chair of a conference, I would back that up by saying, here are a couple of rules and tips and advice for things not to do when you're applying for the applying to speak at a conference. I would say number 1, don't sell your business or pitch your business in any way, shape, or form. When you get on the phone with somebody or write an email or do your pitch, try to completely remove your business and what you do and the benefit and the gain that your business would have by you speaking. I just see that mistake made again and again. I could usually tell when people apply for CMC, they of course fill out an application page and pitch on what their topic is. Very few of them actually look over our agenda or see holes that they could fill. So that would be another great tip, is just look at the agenda, see what slot you can fill. I actually kind of rough draft our agenda, so I put a lot of stuff up, which will probably be up in a month or 2. But look over the agenda and say, this is where I could fit, this is my level of expertise. Try to fit your way into a track at least, or something like that. But you did a great job of that. I actually had approved you for a session, actually because you had not spoken there before. I was going to have you double up, but then we spoke on the phone, and I heard you talk, and you weren't selling. You were selling, telling your story of how you've been successful, and that's what people want to hear. It wasn't about a business that you run or the consulting that you do or whatever else. So
I think people get caught up in this idea that when you're a speaker that you're here to perform, and I don't believe that. I think that you're here to serve. So it's these are the skills that I have, this is the knowledge that I have, can I serve your audience? And I think that makes a really big difference.
Spot on. Well, it's great having you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor.
It's been great for you to be here and meet some great speakers, some great people as well.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Yay. Great stuff. Thanks, Michaela. Bye, everybody.